Basic Physics, Episode 1, because my physics teacher forced me to make a physics video. Well, all of basic physics, aka classical physics, starts from the idea that something was here, and at some point in time, that thing was here. It somehow got there. And so people are like, oh, well, let's just call this the distance between the two objects then. We'll call that displacement. And so on, people were like, oh wow, we just made up a line. All the physics made up. Somebody made it up. They had to make some system. Is this line even straight? I don't know. Is this shortest thing between two objects straight line? Looks like it to me, but maybe not. Maybe we live in 4 dimensions and the straightest line is actually some weird curve. We don't know. In actuality, it was some weird curve. But this is basic physics. We're not going to go into that stuff. That's a reference point. That's the point where we can see. And so, the person, somebody who did physics, probably in the ancient times, or like Newton times, Newton probably wouldn't do this, was like, okay, that was my initial position from my reference point. Because you have to have a reference point. And of course, that's made up. Somebody made that up. They're like, oh, let's make up a reference point. And then a distance was completely made up. Axioms. Just made up. And then, of course, they're like, oh, it went over there. We'll call that x final. Very creative. Again, made up. But what's not made up is the fact that this thing went over there. That's the only thing that's real. Everything else, I don't know. Our world is built on axioms. There are like few axioms in math, and it's really concerning because you can't prove it with its own system. It's really scary, but we'll just move on pretending we don't know any of that stuff. So with this, we can think, oh, that is my final distance. That is my initial distance. This must be my distance traveled. And then people were like, okay, then this is my x naught. We'll draw an arrow. This is my x final. And this thing must be my delta x, which is change in x. And so with this, people were like, oh, so like you're telling me this whole line, let's just pretend the line isn't here, and they put it into algebra. This whole line equals this line plus that line. And then, of course, you can also just say, well, then that means if you subtract this over, subtract that over there, that this thing minus this thing equals that thing. And if you go back to the geometry, that really does make sense. Why? Because if you think about it, you have long line minus small line. What's left over? Oh, right, the other line extending over, and that's your delta x. Well, that's displacement. That's the idea of physics. Well, the very basics. And the concerning thing is that a whole lot of stuff is made up.